Hello, podcast listener. This is your host with the most, JJ. JJ Meets World. Why are you listening to it? Well, you're listening to me meet every single person in the world, interview by interview. That is the goal of JJ Meets World, and so far, so good. Today's episode, we take a deep dive into the world of foster care. Boy, is this an inspiring episode, especially to those of you who've ever thought about becoming a foster family. Here's a great example and some wonderful stories of why you should consider that. Plus, Tucker and I have a major announcement that we make, so let's get to it and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
One of my favorite scenes in any movie ever is the I love to laugh sequence from Mary Poppins, where too much laughing makes you float to the ceiling like you're full of like some kind of helium or hot gas.
I always felt that was false advertising as a kid. I was always upset because I wanted to fly, and that felt like that could get you there. But all it got was my parents mad at me for laughing too hard.
Right. I think a lot of people's parents were mad. And it's funny because that's Mary Poppins' take on it, is that she is laughing is ridiculous. And they do an impression of all these different types of laughs. So they do like some Twitter like birds, like, and then like some only blast with ha. So when I listen to that song and watch that scene, I always think, yeah, you know, it's everyone's a little bit different. And you know, maybe you laugh the same way that your mom laughed, or maybe, you know, you turn around and you have a little because for whatever reason you're an Ernie style laugher. But I do always really dig that. And our discussion today on JJ Meets World involves the foster care system and how every situation is different, but the same. So we're all laughing, but we all have a different style of laughing. And so each of the stories you're going to hear today are different, but they all revolve around the same idea of finding a child a stable environment for that particular time, to give them all the opportunity to thrive and to stay as healthy as possible. Michael Romans, who is a foster parent, is with us, and man alive, this guy I hope is working on a book, because in the short hour we spend with him, he is just blows my mind. And we also have a social worker with Nexus Path as well. Megan Bjone is with us, and she gives a great perspective because she does the work. In fact, she makes a joke about paperwork right off the bat that I think is absolutely true. And that's pretty much as far as my knowledge was when it came to social work. I'm very, very excited for people to listen to this episode of JJ Meets World. So that's coming up in just a few short moments. But beforehand, Tucker and I have an announcement we want to make to you guys, which is we are switching up how we release episodes on JJ Meets World. And I'm pretty excited about this switch. It seems like every time we make a switch, we're evolving how we do this podcast. And this switch in particular is to a guaranteed one episode a week. So Mondays, you'll still get the same episode as you've always come to enjoy on JJ Meets World. And then what we plan on doing is releasing special edition or just extra episodes as we end up with things that fit. So for example, maybe we have a special holiday edition of JJ Meets World that we don't necessarily want to put out on on a Tuesday. Well, now we have the ability to release it on a Saturday, or we can put it out on a Thursday or a Tuesday, whatever it happens to be. I just said Tuesday there as an example, but you guys get what I'm saying here. And I'm really excited about that. I also think too, people have come to appreciate the length of our podcast, but there are some conversations that take a lot longer, and we could be giving more time to. And I think that fits the special edition idea really, really well. Is that if we ever have a 3.5 hour long episode, releasing it as a special edition allows us to do that, or to chunk it into 2 pieces. I mean, the future is wide open for us, and I appreciate that Tucker's willing to go on this journey of discovery with me, of figuring out when's the best time to release and how's the best time to release.
Well, JJ, it's pretty crazy. We're getting really close to our 200th episode of JJ Meets World. And so as we were coming upon 200 episodes, we were just going, listen, what's the best thing we can do for the show right now as we're trying to grow it? And we thought, part of that is doing a quality over quantity thing. And part of it, too, is having the flexibility to do episode releases when it makes the most sense to do them. Our show is a combination of both interviews with new guests as JJ meets new people across the world, but also if we want to do a Sonic the Hedgehog movie review, it might make sense to hold off on doing that until right before it releases. When holidays are coming up, we can do stuff, but we also want to be able to take the energy we were putting into doing 2 episodes every week and redirect it into other things that might help make the show better. So right now, we are currently laying the groundwork for turning JJ Meets World not just into a podcast show, but into a video show as well.
Yeah.
As we want to start growing our YouTube channel, as we're rebuilding the studio again since the pandemic started back in March. So we'll still be doing a mixture of interviews that are over the internet, like we're doing right now. We'll do some that are in the studio. We're just looking forward to making more quality content coming out. So every week, at the very least, you can expect an episode every Monday. And then from time to time, we're going to surprise you with new episodes at weird times. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, just be ready. Be ready to go along for this wild and crazy ride. And let's get the ride going for today's episode. So sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode of JJ Meets World, where we take a deep dive into the foster care world.
JJ Meets World.
It's a dual guest episode of JJ Meets World, and through the beauty of the internet, we're able to connect everyone in a virtual studio. I'm so excited. Hello, Megan.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
And hello, Michael.
Morning, JJ. How you doing?
I'm doing really, really great. Today just feels like a good day, and thank you guys so much for making some time. Can we start with this? Megan, for the JJ Meets World listeners, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Megan Bjone, and I am a treatment foster care social worker at Nexus Path here in Fargo.
And Michael, how about yourself?
My name is Mike Romans, and I am currently a foster father of 2 young children in the process of adoption, and we live in Jamestown and have been doing treatment foster care for approximately 4 years now.
And you just happen to be watching a softball game while this thing's going on at the same time, too.
I do. I am I'm watching my oldest daughter, who we adopted through treatment foster care, play softball in Bismarck right now, and she literally just slid into home base. So I'm in the clear from watching. So we're good to go.
Nice. Well, I'm really excited to have this conversation today, just because I think most people's knowledge of the foster care system and what foster care is sort of exists on television screens and watching movies. Recently, I watched the movie Instant Family, and I'm curious, have either of you seen that movie?
I've seen it. I have. Yep.
So beyond the fact that it made me cry halfway through it, and then at the end as well, I thought that this just had a really good feel. Sometimes, and I'm gonna be a little blunt at the beginning here, I think people assume foster care is sort of a last step, and it's it's kind of shrouded in mystery, and it's associated with something bad. And I have found, working with great groups like Path over the years that it's not that, and it's so much more complex, and the people who are working in it have such a passion for foster care that I'm always amazed. So Megan, if I could start off with you just by saying, how did this become a passion for you?
Well, it's kind of a funny story. I grew up in a really small town in North Dakota, less than 100 people. So I didn't know what social work was, didn't have any experiences with foster care. I went to MSUM in Moorhead and went in undecided. I always knew I wanted to work with kids. I actually thought I was always going to be a teacher. But I did go into college undecided just because I wasn't 100% sure. And really was questioning what I'm going to be doing in college. Where am I going to go with my life? I was sitting in the library and one of my classmates said, "You would be a really good social worker." And I go, "What is social work?" I had no idea. Never had heard about social work before. So just kind of did a little digging. I took an intro to social work class at college and I thought, this is it. I think this is what I need to do and want to do. And from there, it just kind of rolled. I did my internship at Path in the first program as well as the treatment foster care program, graduated college, and I have been at Path for the last 7.5 years as a treatment foster care social worker. So I think working with the kids and families, our organization is wonderful, and it's a perfect fit. And clearly I love what I do because I've been there for so long and still enjoy it. And every day is a new experience. So
even with every day being a new experience, could you tell us a little bit about like what the day to day is for you?
Yes, that's a really hard question for me to answer because there is not a day that really looks like the next day. But I also think that's what I love about my job. As far as what I do in a day, it varies. People joke that as a social worker, you have to do paperwork. That is accurate. That is definitely true, but there are a lot of other components that come with it too. It could be whether I attend a team meeting for a youth at the county social services. I could also attend IEP meetings. I do a lot of communication with different team members for the foster youth, whether it's a therapist or a psychiatrist or a primary care physician. I do a lot of assistance with getting youth to and from appointments. I could help with supervising family interactions with the youth and their biological family members. It really varies from day to day. Nothing looks the same. So it's kind of different every day, but it could be a whirlwind of whatever it may be. It could also be managing a crisis with a youth if they end up in the hospital and need foster parents want some support there. I will be at the ER with you. So there's a lot of different things that I can do in a day.
Over the years, how many kids do you think you've come into contact with?
Oh man, that is a hard question. I haven't actually ever tracked. If I had to guess, I would say probably 100 on my caseload, maybe.
Wow.
That again is a guess. It's really hard to say. We typically have a caseload at any time between 8 and 10 youth on our caseload, but that also varies from time to time. So that's a good guess, I would say.
Now, Michael, what was the calling that your family received to make foster care an important part?
Well, it kind of went in two parts, to be honest. My oldest daughter, the one that's playing softball right now, actually is as close to an oops baby as you can get in adoption. And the reason I say that is my wife and we had adopted my 10-year-old son from infancy, and we're literally sitting on the couch talking about when we wanted to do our next home study for another domestic adoption. And as we were having that conversation, my daughter's birth great aunt called me on the phone and had explained that she had a niece that was in foster care and they were going to adopt her, but they felt that her being connected to the rest of her birth family was not a good idea. And she knew that we had did, the adoption and wanted to know if we were interested in adopting. And so I'm taking this call and I'm like, I don't know. And so we talked about it and prayed about it, and, kind of went through the basic steps of meeting her and, seeing if she was a good fit for the family. And so then, long story short, we ended up adopting her shortly after that. And then, kind of waited till the kids were a little bit older because we wanted them to, we kind of felt the calling then to foster care, but we wanted to make sure it was a family, a family agreement. We didn't want to do it and have our kids resent it. And we didn't know the level of care that Gabby was going to need as she got older, nor, Jeremiah, the other adopted son that we have. And so we kind of waited a little bit to make sure that they were old enough to be able to have a say in the decision. And we talked to them, and they were all for it. They were excited. In fact, we actually personally knew our Path foster worker, Jody. And so anytime she would come to the house to do any kind of home study or anything, my youngest son, who when we started was a little over, he was just about to turn 6. And every time she would come, he'd run outside to check, and he'd ask her, he goes, "Do you got a kid for us?" So we knew that the kids were really excited to do it. And, we've got the blessing of, with Gabby going through the foster care system, and we adopted her when she was 5. So she really has been a blessing to the journey too, because she's got a different perspective. There's times when situations will arise in our household, and there's just things that I can't answer. There's questions that I can't answer. There's feelings that I haven't felt that Gabby has. And there's been times when, it's kind of eating a piece of humble pie to ask your 12-year-old to go try to talk down your, 10-year-old or 9-year-old or whatever, whatever age they're in, foster child. But she does a fantastic job of it. She knows when that kid needs the hard truth, and she knows when that kid just needs to hear, it's going to be okay. And, she stated several times already that she wants to go to college already to be a social worker. So it's, I truly feel it's been a blessing to our family, not only being able to add to our family, but just to be able to add to the character of our family. It's kind of neat. We were just at a birthday party yesterday, and we've got, a foster daughter. I had went to take my foster son to the bathroom, and so my son and my soon-to-be adopted foster daughter were sitting at the campsite. Well, my foster daughter wanted a Sprite, and I had already said no. And, she went and asked the gal at the campsite, which she was like, "Yeah, we're camping. I don't care. And Jeremiah, my son, had said, Dad said that that's not supposed to happen. And I know sometimes she tries to do that. So I've really got to protect my sister from making bad choices and bad mistakes." And so, it's really been able to be a blessing because I feel it's added to the character of our family. And it's really allowed our family to, the kids especially, to see everybody as family. And my daughter is even much better. She could literally tell you, I just heard you ask the question of how many kids she's come into contact with. So I was kind of trying to count in my head and try to figure out how many kids we've had contact with. And I can't even think of it. I could probably go ask her and she'd come and tell you the name of every one of them. So,
That's amazing.
she literally considers all of them family, whether they're with us for a respite weekend or whether they're with us for a 2-week period, or, whether they're the 2 that we're adopting right now. It's been just an amazing journey as a family, and it's really brought us closer as a family. I can't speak enough about it. Has every moment been perfect? Absolutely not. But, it's not really a whole lot different than a typical family. Yes, kids in treatment foster care have meltdowns and have, emotional things that, and maybe their tantrums and their behavioral issues are a little bit more out of emotion. But, to be truthful. And we've had and I hate using this term, what some people in town have called the worst of the worst when it comes to, trauma and traumatic behavioral kids. And it's not a whole lot different than you would typically see as, in a family. And, I have a little bit of a skewed perception of that because I teach K-5 special education. So, I'm kind of in the crux of it all day long. But, so that kind of thing, it's kind of a skill set that I have too, is I'm able to really help to de-escalate a lot of those things and, just kind of get them back on track and back to feeling the way that they should and the way that makes them feel good.
Well, and I think nowadays we're so much better about understanding emotions in adults and children, and knowing that it's not just a matter of like, just calm down, and it's so much deeper than that. And so it sounds like your household is amazing. So the next time I'm having a tough day, if you don't mind, I'm just going to come over and you guys
sounds
can
great.
help me out.
Yeah, just bring coffee. That's all I ask, is that you bring coffee.
Okay, so let's get into this then. So, Michael, you mentioned, foster care isn't just we have a child that we need to place. It sounds like there's all different types of stays, for lack of a better word. So, Megan, could you talk about so if you have a child in foster care, does that mean that they're always with the family? I heard about like the respite weekends that Michael was talking about. Can you kind of explore that a little bit?
Yes. Typically when a child is with a foster family, they are with them full time. Of course, there are times where foster parents have to go out of town, or they need a weekend where they don't have any youth, or maybe even just a break for everyone to kind of reset. A lot of people, when they have their own children, they use aunts and uncles or grandpa and grandma or whoever it may be to just kind of have some weekend or space themselves. And so with foster youth, we typically do that through respite care. And so that would be a child goes to a respite home. It could be for a weekend, it could be for a night, it could be for a week if needed, really depending on the family's needs. And we typically like to try to utilize the same respite provider. So the respite providers also are supports to the youth and the family. They build relationships with those children and try to be an ongoing support for the youth as well.
What's the age range? Obviously, from infancy, when do you age out of the foster program?
We can serve children up to the age of 21. When a child does turn 18, they do have the option to remain in the 18 plus foster care program. It does look a little differently as far as your ability to kind of make your own decisions at that point in time as an 18-year-old. But we have a lot of youth too that are still in high school, and they might have one more year of high school before they graduate, and they want to stay in their foster home setting to finish that. So we do have that option where youth from 18 to up to 21 can stay in the foster care system. There are also different situations where if a foster youth goes to college, they could also still remain in the 18 plus foster care program. And with that, it's just a little extra support for the youth. They still have their foster families as a support to go home if the dorm is closed or, whatever it may be. So we can serve youth up to the age of 21.
And what about the ability to try and keep siblings together? How does that work? Let's say there's 3 children in the same family, various ages. That must be one of the harder parts of this puzzle.
It is. It can be a little bit more difficult at times to find families that are able to take the sibling groups. Just that might be due to their own home setting, not having enough bedrooms or whatever it may be. Our ultimate goal is to keep the siblings together if at all possible. Again, there are times where unfortunately that isn't an option. But what we do like to do is make sure that those children do maintain regular connections, whether it be through scheduled visits or they can go back and forth between the foster homes and kind of have overnights with one another. So we do try to get really creative in those situations if it's not possible to have the siblings placed together. But it is our ultimate goal. If possible, that is what we try to do. Priority is placing them together.
Michael, have you ever had a situation where you've taken care of siblings at the same time?
No, not at the same time, but we have had. Well, ironically, the two that we have right now are a part of a sibling group that is in foster care, and like Megan had talked about, my current foster daughter she's also being adopted by a different family. They had had team meetings and had attempted to keep them together, but it was a situation where just them being together brought out more of the trauma of what happened to them, the reason they were in traumatic foster care. So the team made the decision to separate them with, the contingency, so to speak, that we do the best to our abilities to, maintain contact. And we've done that, now with the COVID, obviously we've used a lot of Zoom, and, my daughter just turned 9 and her sister just is 7. And so, talking to each other on computer is cool and fun, but then it's just not the same. However, there has been, like with my son for a great deal of time, he wanted absolutely no contact of it. I don't know if it was a situation of just remembrance of it, but now he's really been asking about it. So we've done a little more with connections with pictures and Zoom calls and things. He's with the previous foster family, because what happened is my son he was with placed with his brother, and then the foster mom wasn't equipped to handle both kids at the same time. So, my son went to a different home, went to a different town, and was actually kicked out of daycare, of every single daycare in that town. So they had no choice but to move him from that foster family. And so he came to us as basically a weekend respite, kind of a, hey, can you hang on to this guy while we find a more permanent spot closer to his brother? And it's been a pretty long weekend because he hasn't left. It was kind of one of those, the minute he came there, he was part of our family. I mean, and you don't, obviously the goal isn't adoption. The goal of foster care is reunification. But we kind of had a feeling in this particular situation that wasn't going to be the case. And, our social worker had known that this was going to, our ultimate goal was to grow our family through this. Obviously, like I said, we consider every kid that's been in our home family, but, so to be able to maintain that for us right now has been a challenge. Right now, they had asked us at first to take on my daughter's sister. However, we were, as Megan had said, we didn't have the space, so we were unable to. And so they had kind of contemplated trying to find, another home that could, but the two girls had been in several homes for a long time. So they just kind of decided, we're just going to keep it status quo for right now. And that's just kind of how it ended up. Like I said, it was kind of one of those things, and family wise, it's not. And obviously we're going to do the best that we can to maintain those connections and whatnot. But they were almost better when they could see each other on their own terms. And, obviously siblings always fight, but the things that went on between the two of them was a lot more than sibling rivalry. And, the team kind of equated a lot of that to, just the remembrance of the trauma that they went through when they were together. And they've also got a brother who right now is in residential care. So, maintaining the three of them together was impossible, and the two was very difficult. So, they're apart, they're being adopted apart right now, but, we have every intention of keeping them together in some capacity and as much as they can.
When when a child enters foster care, do you know how long that situation's going to be, or is it you just start the ticker going, and sometimes it's longer and sometimes it's shorter? How does that work from day one?
Well, from my perspective, a lot of, how we've been presented to it is we've kind of been presented with where they're at in, whether it's a court hearing, whether, permanency hearings. They give us as much of that information as we can, but it's not like, they can never just say, well, this is a 2-week placement, or this is a, whatever. I mean, unless it's a respite care, like we talked about, where, it's one of those situations where, we just need somebody for the weekend because they need a break. Or, for instance, we have a weekend where we've got a baseball and a softball tournament, and with the COVID stuff going on, they want to try to limit family members even when it comes to going to the games. And so we've kind of tried to take advantage of a little bit of that respite care. They like the two respite families that we're using. Both of them are very close to those families and whatnot. And one of them's on a farm, so my little guy gets out on their farm and, just has the time of his life. But it's kind of like going on a vacation. You like to go there, you like to spend a little bit of time there, but it's nice to be home too. So, but we've had a couple different placements that, it was one of those where, well, this is, we're going to see how it goes, and it may be 2 weeks, it may be 2 years, we don't know, and it just kind of depends on where they are in the court process and whatnot. And Megan could probably give a more technical explanation of all that stuff, but from our perspective, we're never given an exact time frame, because I don't think that's ever able to, you're ever able to know that.
Megan, you, I imagine, have the difficult job of seeing a family when it's in crisis. And there are a lot of emotions going, I imagine, by the time you get involved with helping heal what's taking place. It's gotta be tough to shake that off, maybe, at the end of the day. Even though that you are doing such work that, like you said, you still enjoy it and you still have a passion for it, so it's important. But is it hard at the end of the day sometimes to just, say like, nope, tomorrow the sun's going to rise again?
There are definitely those days that can be really trying and tough in this work. Not only social workers, but foster parents too also see a lot of the trauma that the kids have endured. It can come out, whether it's through their emotions or things that they might say. And it can be very difficult at times to hear some of those things and see some of those things. At the end of the day, it can be tough to turn it off. But we do what we can. We have to take care of ourselves too, as workers and foster parents, to know that we are doing what we can to help these youth and these families to heal and to try to move forward from those situations. So absolutely, it can be difficult, but also there is always time for change. And with that, that's our jobs, is to try to help support and move forward from those experiences.
Who's the perfect candidate to be a foster parent?
There's really not just a perfect candidate. You could be, a lot of people think that you have to be married and live in a house and a white picket fence, and that's not the case to be a foster parent. Really, we work with a lot of different families, whether you're single, same-sex couple, not married, but cohabitating. So there's a lot of different families that we work with. The requirements are you have to be at least 21 years of age to provide foster care. You don't have to have experience parenting your own children. We do have a lot of families that come in that might not have their own kids, but with that, and that could be a very scary thing. But with that, you do have a lot of support around you with a social worker and with the child's team, whether it be the county worker or a child's therapist or whoever that may be to help walk you through different techniques to utilize with a child. And another great resource for a lot of our families at Nexus Path is we do provide a lot of training to our families prior to taking your first placement. So you get a lot of information on trauma and how that affects behaviors. You get a lot of information on just the foster care system in general through the PRIDE training. So there's a lot of different great resources to help walk these families through this process to make them feel like they are ready and able to take foster youth into their home.
So one thing that I imagine must be unique about our North Dakota system compared to some other states is the bulk of our state is pretty rural. And so when someone enters the foster care system, do you try to keep them in the same area so that they can maintain the same school? Or, how does that work? If somebody from Sargent County is there, but there's no foster parents currently available in Sargent County, does it move? How does that process work?
That's a very kind of complicated process, but it is always our goal, if possible, to try to keep them in the same community, whether that be to definitely maintain them in the same school or make sure that they are staying near their biological family members, because our ultimate goal in foster care is reunification with the biological family. Of course, there's times that can't happen, but most of the time that is the goal that we are working towards. So we do take a lot of different things into consideration when we're working on placing a child in one of our foster homes. Definitely, we do try to keep them in the same community if possible. At times, that is not an option, that we might not have openings. So we do have to explore other communities or regions. And so that can make things tough if they are a distance away. But again, we do a lot of things to try to get creative to maintain family connections or whatever sort of connections they might have had in their original community setting.
I'm always fascinated when it comes to how many organizations can band together to help individuals. And it's some of the important work that nonprofits and government agencies do. Sometimes I think people take for granted the fact that we have these amazing systems in place that operate and you don't know anything about them until you have to utilize their services. This last year, I got to know a lot more about what Path does, and I was blown away by that organization. As things move forward, just in the world in general, and as we become smarter and we become more attuned to the needs of others, and I know that the foster system has changed drastically in the last 25 years as well. Do you think that we continue to change, or have we found a good system at this point?
I think we continue to change. As you said, our world changes, and with that, you kind of have to adapt to everything, all of those changes. So I think our system continues to change and make progress in different areas. Just even in the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of changes as far as like our prudent parenting, where that gives our foster parents a little bit more ability to make decisions for the children without having to jump through so many hoops to get certain approvals for things, that we would consider normal child activities. Sometimes in foster care, it can get a little difficult. There's liability and, different rules and regulations for a reason. But sometimes that can make things a little bit difficult for a child to participate in everyday activities, such as even just getting your learner's permit. But again, we've seen some major progress in that area to move forward with allowing these foster youth that ability to experience some of those things. So absolutely, it is always changing, and it should continue to change because our world is different. And so that is the nice piece, It's not always easy to make those changes, but there's also a lot of people in our community and throughout our state that are great advocates, not only for the children that we serve, but also the biological families, as well as the foster parents too.
Michael, what are some of the myths that people talk to you about who are not foster parents, who say, well, gosh, I've always assumed this?
Well, it's kind of funny you say that. I actually just wrote something that I'm preparing a blog entry for that very thing. The biggest myth that I hear is, oh, I could never do it. I could never be a foster parent. And, I just say, you can, because like like Megan said, there's no perfect family, and there's also no perfect level of foster care that you can do. And, whether we're in just desperate need of, respite care. I hear a lot of people that say, oh, I don't know how you can give them back. I don't know how you can give them, you get to know these kids, you get to love these kids, and how do you give them back? I hear that a lot. And, it isn't easy. I'll be 100% honest with that. It isn't easy because you're unsure of the situation. One of the biggest myths too is that, oh, well, if a kid goes into foster care, it's because their parents are bad people. And, that's not the case at all. And, obviously, we're in a changing world. Obviously people make mistakes, but, that doesn't mean that I or anyone feels that those mistakes should be a part of, that you should have anybody removed. And, you hear a lot of the negativity, and unfortunately the negativity of foster care is what people hear about. They hear, all these horror stories of kids in traumatic foster care completely trashing a room, or, kicking holes in the wall, or, doing this, that, or the other, or, how can you put your kids through seeing that? What's that doing to your kids? Well, as I talked earlier, it's strengthened my kids. It's made my kids better people. And, obviously it's a family by family situation and whatnot, but, a lot of the same things are going to happen in a typical family that happen with traumatic foster care. And that's what people don't, they think that some of those things are limited to traumatic foster care situations. And I was in a traumatic foster care, and I put a hole in my wall when I was younger. So does that mean that somebody, that my mom should have not taken me? And that's, where I just wish I could tell people, and I wish people could see. And one thing I wish, and I know there's not really a way around this, because of confidentiality and whatnot, is, one of the regulations is with the foster care is, you can't have kids on social media. You can't have pictures of foster kids on social media and whatnot. And, we're kind of a big social media family just because we have so much family spread out. And I get a lot of grief that I don't put a lot of pictures of my kids on social media. And, I will kind of come back at that and say, well, when I can put all of my kids on social media, then I will. And it's very, very difficult to be able to tell, your foster kids, oh, scoot over, I'm going to take a picture of just my kids and put it on. I don't like to do that. So, I take pictures, I do things, and, they don't know that it's not going on Facebook. They don't know that it's not going on, whatever. But I can still show family that, where I feel that if more people could see those things and see those positive interactions, then there would be a lot different perspective on especially traumatic foster care and foster care in general. There's like, there's multiple levels of the foster care. There's the treatment foster care that Megan and I are involved in with Path, and then there's also county foster care. And I know that has some of the negative connotations too, where that child is removed because they're bad parents. They have bad parents. Well, they may have made a mistake that they can get help for, they can get treatment for, and be reunited with their kids. And that's, like Megan said, the ultimate goal is reunification. And, there's been times when I've helped work with parents. I'm also a certified nurtured heart instructor. So I've done parenting classes myself that have had foster parents in it, not necessarily foster parents of kids that are in my home, but foster parents that are in the county and in my area. But then the myth too is that these social, they say, well, these social workers are so busy, they place these kids and then you never hear from them. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. I mean, we're extremely blessed with the Path organization to always have people available. They're now, not to say that our personal social worker is available 24/7, but they've got on-call social workers all the time, where there's been times when we've had situations in the middle of the night that we've had to call an on-call social worker, and they'll stay on the phone with us until everything's said and done. And I mean, there could very well be times that we've talked to Megan and not made that connection and not known that, and that could be kind of a twist of irony right now. But we've never felt unsupported in the least bit when it comes to that perspective, and then people that just say, well, they just dump it and they expect you to take care of all this stuff. That's not the case at all. And there's so many positives of doing foster care that people don't get to hear about because they don't necessarily want to listen. They think, well, I can't do that. There's no way I could do that. Oh, it takes a special person to do that. And that's true, but more people could be that special person than you truly believe you could be, because like Megan said, there's no such thing as a perfect parent. I've made mistakes. I've made mistakes with my foster kids that I wish that I hadn't done. And I mean, she talked about the level of education that they give and they expect for foster care and whatnot. I've been a special education teacher. I've got my master's degree. I've done it for 16 years, and there's times I make mistakes. So I mean, you to be able to lean on people and to do that. And, the four most important words that you can do are, I need your help, whether that's to your spouse, whether that's to your kids, or whether that's to your social worker. I mean, it's just a matter of working together for that kid. I mean, you're there for that kid, and that's what you ultimately have to remember.
I have to imagine too that you get to do a lot of the same stuff over and over and over again. And so you get better with it as it goes along. Every person is individual, but like for example, how many kids have you taught to ride a bike, do you think?
Truthfully, that's kind of a sore subject because I've never gotten to teach a kid to ride a bike.
What?
My kid, seriously, and it really bothers me. My kids have all learned to ride their bike on their own, and I really thought, because when my little guy came to us, he was 3, and I'm not lying, that was one of the first things I thought of when we had a 3-year-old is, I'm finally going to get to teach somebody to ride a bike. And no lie, I took his, I was like, okay, today's the day, it's gonna happen. And I said, okay, buddy, because my little guy goes through bikes like nobody's business. So we had, I think, 3 different ones, from my son, and then into, we bought my foster son a bike for his birthday. That's kind of our thing, is we buy bikes for our kids' first birthday that they're there with us. So, we bought him the bike and it still had the training wheels on it. Well, we had a bike that didn't from when my son was littler. And so he said, well, I want to try the one with no training wheels on it. So I'm like, okay, here's my chance. I mean, I'm going to get to, hold the seat, run beside him. And I mean, I was holding on to the seat. He got on and he's like, okay, let go. And he took off. He was gone. And we were riding the trails later that day. And
Michael, I have it on good authority that JJ has a terrible center of balance and is awful on a bicycle. So when he comes to see you and he brings the coffee, it might be helpful for you to give him some pointers on how to ride a bike. Maybe we can make that dream come true for you, man.
Well, that'd be perfect, because I'm a triathlete too. So I hopefully, if I can get him to ride a bike, then maybe I can get him to do triathlons with me.
Well, okay, so I picked the world's worst example for that question. Maybe there's something, maybe there's something else, because you do get the chance to work with kids, and it sounds like you're working with a really wide range of ages, and so you do get to get better and better and better at it. I remember my dad telling me, he goes, the hard thing about being a parent is you're expected in your own mind to know everything and what to do right off the bat. And he goes, you're learning as fast as the kids are learning. He goes, so for example, my dad, way into sports, I ended up being into theater. And so all of a sudden he was like, okay, so now I need to understand what this Phantom of the Opera thing is that JJ's so excited about. Why couldn't he just be a Twins fan?
Right. Well, there is. I mean, that is an example. My little guy is. I mean, he's as much like me as you can get, but he had never been fishing before. So actually, just last weekend we went fishing for the first time, and to serious fishing. I mean, he's I cast, I hold on to the pole, he gets bored after 30 seconds and goes and plays in the rocks. Well, then he had asked me, he's like, Dad, can we go fishing? And I mean, before he could even end his sentence, we were in the truck and ready to go. And he was using his little rod and whatnot and, couldn't cast it. And we were and I was teaching him to cast it. And finally he's like, can I just use yours? So he went and got my spare rod out of the truck. And, he was a casting machine. And I had been fishing all day. No lie. He takes 2 casts and reeled in a northern that was bigger than he was. So, I mean, he was absolutely elated. In fact, he had a counseling appointment where they were going through all these different emotions and doing this thing. And every single thing that he talked to his counselor about revolved around his catching that fish. And, so that was kind of I kind of say that was my moment of triumph as a foster dad is just that moment. That was one of the happiest moments I've had as a foster dad is just that situation. And, in retrospect, kind of like you said, my foster daughter right now is the complete opposite. I mean, we were moving the trampoline in our backyard one day and there was a night crawler about halfway out of the ground. And she just ran screaming like you would have thought there was a bloody head under the thing. And me being the guy I am, pulled the night crawler the rest of the way out and threw it towards her because I'm like, you know what, you're going to be here. You might as well get used to this kind of thing. And so she didn't like me much after that, but it really did help because it kind of got her away from it. And then yesterday we were out at the lake. There's a restaurant that is out by our lake. And sure enough, she was out with my little guy crawling on the rocks. I mean, dirtier than you could. And I would have never, my wife was like, God, why is she wearing a white tee? She's wearing this. And I'm like, well, you told her to wear old clothes and she's down getting dirty and playing in that's what I've been trying to get her to do for a year and a half. So embrace it. And so she's really kind of come out of her shell in that and really just done different things that she's used to. I mean, if you would have let her, she would have sat and played Barbies in her room forever. And, just being with us, she's really had a lot of different experiences. She kind of wants to come hunting with us where I'm a big hunter. And I'm like, well, we're going to have to get kind of used to getting not screaming when night crawlers are halfway out of the ground before we're going to go hunting. But, that's something we can work at. So, but I mean, just her having that desire and want to do that and just explore and open up is awesome too. But yet, it's been kind of, she loves music and loves things like that too. So being able to embrace those things and realize, okay, she's not the athletic one in the family. So I'm going to have to, like you said, learn a whole different genre of talents to be able to support her in those ways, the best way that we can.
Megan, just out of curiosity, what's the situation with if someone wants to become a foster family or a foster parent? I mean, what does that process look like once they contact your office?
Yes. If you are interested in being a foster parent at any time, you can contact our agency. Just by reaching out to us would never mean that you were committed to the process. We really want the families that reach out to feel comfortable and want to move forward with the process. We do have a lot of, right now we're trying to get creative with the COVID. So they are doing a lot of online Zoom inquiry meetings where you can kind of sit in and learn about the process. But what that essentially looks like is you would then get assigned a social worker if you decide you want to move forward. You have to go through a process called a home study assessment where they would sit down and get to know your family. to learn more about you, to make sure that it would be a good fit to also continue to move forward. You have to complete background checks and child abuse and neglect checks. There's also a process where we go through and get references. And so it is quite a process, but you also have that social worker standing next to you and walking you through that process to help you through it. Anytime you would have a question or need assistance with getting certain things done, they are always there to support you. And then there's also the piece where you would do the home study or, walkthrough of the foster home to make sure that it is safe and able to meet a child's needs. So you would have a social worker with you the entire time walking you through that.
What is the need like in our area? I mean, is there obviously the more people that can sign up to open their home is the better, because you never know what's going to happen. But are we meeting the needs? Are we falling short at this point?
We are always in desperate need of foster families. We can never have enough families for these youth. We do have a list at this moment and at all times where there are youth waiting to get into foster family settings. And so absolutely, we are always in desperate need of foster families. And with that, like Mike said earlier, not even just full-time TFC foster parents, but also even just the respite families that if you are interested in maybe providing just some short-term period of care for kids, where you could just be that respite family where you wouldn't have to have a full-time placement. So we are always in desperate need for more foster families.
And I know that you mentioned that minimum age is 21, but could like a retiree be a foster home?
Absolutely. We have a lot of families that are retired. There is no age limit to how old you can't be, or you have to be under a certain age to provide foster care either. As long as you are healthy and able to provide a safe, stable, nurturing environment to a foster youth, there is absolutely, we take any age up to any age. So
I think that's so exciting that that it opens up a new opportunity for so many people. And I hope that people who listen to this podcast get a sense of, gosh, we've thought about this before, or maybe it's been something that's rambled around in my head, but I've never vocalized it to my partner. I hope that they take that step right now. And, it sounds like to me, there's no harm in getting the information and finding out if your home would be a good fit. As you said, you're not committed just by calling. It's definitely we both have to like each other to start this dance type situation. Michael, as we kind of get close to wrapping this conversation up, how long do you think you're going to remain a foster provider?
I kind of joke with my wife that we're going to be that family that has 200 foster kids and whatnot. We're actually in the process. Like I said, right now we're adopting our 2. So that puts us at full capacity in the house that we're in right now. So we're in the process of doing some updates on our house and remodeling on our house, basically to up the value so that we can sell it and buy bigger so that we can continue to do it. So, I mean, I want to continue to do it for a long period of time. I mean, I enjoy it. I've gotten, a lot of, they say that we give a lot to these kids, and I think that these kids have given a lot to me, and they've made me a better dad. They've made me a better teacher. They've made me just a better person in general. So it's, as far as is the length of time, I mean, as long as I'm still standing, I'm going to be able to do it. And there's times when obviously, I mean, even any parent would think, I don't know how much longer I can do this, but it's going to be a long time for us. I really see us doing it for a strong period of time. That's what's nice about, like she said, there's no age requirements and whatnot. I mean, I turned 40 this year and I'm still kicking and I'm still going, where we don't have to worry about, we can add to the family in ways that I don't have to worry about the health risks. I don't have to worry about, okay, well, we're too old to have kids of our own. And so, this way we can have many different kids of our own, and we can make an impact on those kids in our home, whether they're in our house for 2 years, 2 days, 2 months, 20 years. It's, the amount of impact that we can make is phenomenal, and I want to keep doing that.
Michael, I love the fact that throughout this entire conversation, you keep using the word family, family, family. It's never been in us and then them. I mean, from my interaction here, it sounds like you absolutely do love every child that comes through that door, whether it's for a little bit of time or for a long amount of time. And gosh, I mean, if we had more people like you out there in the world, I think it would be a better place. But thank you for doing what you do, and thank your wife for being a part of it, and your kids. I mean, it just sounds. This is the story that people want to see, that people should be seeing when they hear about how the foster system can reinforce a childhood, so that it no longer has to be about trauma, but it can be about having a childhood and thriving in their environment.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And like I said, that's one thing that my kids have taught me. I mean, and I'm sure, you talk about the language of family. I'm sure there was times when we were first starting that it was us and them, like you said. But my kids have always considered these family. And, my daughter's big into art, and she's drawn things with family. And it's literally, like I said, had every single name of every kid that we've had in our home, whether that's been for, a weekend respite or a 6-week placement, or, the 2 that we're adopting. It's absolutely phenomenal.
One of my favorite movies is 3 Men and a Little Lady, and there's a great moment in it. And this is just kind of to talk about like how we define the word family. And she's at a daycare, and they said, well, draw a picture of your family. And so she draws a picture of herself and her mom, and then the 3 dads. And they go, well, who are these people? She goes, this is my mommy, this is my biological daddy, and this is my surrogate daddy, and this is my other surrogate daddy. And the daycare provider just looks at her and goes, okay. And since I saw that as a kid, I always thought like, well, yeah, my definition of family can be drastically different than your definition of family, but we both can use the word, and we're both right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think I don't really know where I was going with that any further, but I would like to end with this. We'll end the podcast on this. Megan, if people are interested in becoming a part of the foster family system, how should they go about that? What are the first steps they can take with Nexus Path?
You can visit our website at nexusfamilyhealing.org. You could always call our office as well, and the number to contact our office is 877-766-PATH, PATH. We also have a Facebook page on Facebook, the Nexus Path Family Healing. So feel free to reach out in any way possible. And again, if you contact us, it doesn't mean that you are committed to anything. It's even just getting some more information that we're happy to provide at any time. So.
And Michael, let's get a little update on the softball game. How are things going so we can bookend this podcast?
Well, they are warming up for their second game. I'm assuming, with the way the first couple innings went that I got to watch, I'm assuming they won their first game. So they're just jogging into the dugout to kick off the second game. So hopefully they can win this one, and we don't have to get here till 1:00 tomorrow, so I can sleep in a little bit.
Well, let's get you back into the stands. Megan, Michael, thank you so much for taking some time and being on JJ Meets World. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks as well. I mean, it's nice. One of my passions is being able to get out the positivity of foster care, and this is a great way to do it. So I appreciate the opportunity.
That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce 2 new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. His name is Tucker, and he's a producer. Let's spell his name. It's Tucker Tucker. His social security number is 502. Oh, you don't want me to do the rest? Okay.